Good evening. Let us discuss 30th June 2015 newspaper over here. Now, in this, the first thing is the pulses production. We all know that India is still dependent on pulses and import of the pulses. Now, what is the reason? Now, the yield per acre or per hectare of the pulses is very low when compared to the cereals, oil seeds, etc. The reason being is the technology proof, or else whatever the technological changes which we have brought in, the research and development did not penetrate into the pulses yet. And it has really improved the production with regard to the cereals, but did not improve the production in the pulses. On the other hand, most of the farmers cultivate the pulses on the inferior land. So it means that where the land itself having a low production, these are being more seen as an alternative crops rather than the regular crops. So that is the reason why we are still dependent on the imports. So in this context, if you can increase the revenue of the farmer on that, then he will shift to this. That's why the minimum support price to the pulses is much hiked. Over the cereals, the shift of the farmer towards the pulses will be made possible. And the second thing is, now most of us is a dryland agriculture. So the competition is between the called as core cereals and pulses comes over here. Now the pulses and core cereals, they can be cultivated together. So we have to promote something called as mixed cropping patterns in India. Or mixed cropping is something which we can talk about. Actually, pulses has a regenerative power to the soil because they fix the nitrogenous rhizobium bacteria. So that's what is. It means that so they take the environmental nitrogen and they fix it into to the soil. So the pulses, if they are being grown, obviously the soil fertility has to improve and nitrogen levels has to improve. That will provide help to the other crops. So the mixed cropping is one thing which we can encourage in India. So with these steps we can improve the production of the pulses. And next is Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. Now, in this, 50 countries have already signed the memorandum of agreement now, and the articles of association. So, in this, India, with 8.52% of the investment, has 7.5% of the voting share, which is one among the highest in the world. That is, it is second in place. On the other hand, China with 30.34% of share investment has a voting share of around 26%. So the China is in the first place, followed by India. Now this is a regional in its character. Now it means that the voting share, 75% of the vote, they will be among the regional players, that is among the Asian countries. And next is how it is different from World Bank and IMF. So the political sanctions are World Bank and IMF keeping themselves away from giving loans on political context will not happen with AIIB. It means that it's purely on the economic considerations it is going to provide for the loans, especially to improve the connectivity in Asia and to make the Asia as a continent for this particular century. If the future has to belong to Asia, we have to develop the international or else intercontinental and Asian infrastructure for the first, and this bank is aimed towards that. Now, but one thing is, the China with highest contribution to this, it has got virtually a veto power, which is one thing of concern to the people. And the next is, in India, entrepreneurial climate is very weak. The startup environment is very poor in India. The major reason is we have the complex laws, and because of this complex laws, more rules come up. More rules will give more power to bureaucracy. That will ultimately lead to red tape. So, one thing is the complexity of the laws, the bureaucratic rules, attitude of the civil servants, all these are killing the startup environment in India. So that's why the startup environment is more moving towards the Silicon Valley. And the second thing is, the startup environment needs, incubator centers, and next is human resources, and third is financial resources. The financial resources has to flow in the form of investments, either it is angel investments, or it is through stock exchanges, or it is through banks. Now, The banks don't believe in the startups. The stock exchanges, they have got too much of regulatory regime. Now, angel investors to invest on startups, there are too many the regulatory frameworks in India. So, in this context, what it has been said is closing $10 million deal in India is much difficult than closing the 20 billion plus WhatsApp deal in the United States. That is what is the exactly the statement reflects what is the environment of startups in India. But however, few states they are coming with this incubator centers which are been providing for the relatively cost-free environment for these people to explore their new opportunities in the world. Now, especially in the university level itself, if you can create these and activate these incubator centers that will provide for a long-term benefit to India. Let us see, the government says that it is going to revamp the so-called startup environment. Already in the last budget also certain incentives were arranged. We have to see further on this. Now, the World Development Report, understand the Sampath's articles are, they are the best. The World Development Report, I suggest to all the students to go to the highlights of this World Development Report, especially if you are the supporter of the neoliberal framework of development. World Development Report specifically makes the argument in support of these things. Now, you can quote all these World Development Reports which are being given by Sampath in your argument. Now, what you can do is, take that report, what are the highlights of this report, 2 or 3 points. Gender equality and development is 1 year report. Agricultural development is 1 year report. So what are the thoughts of it? Our central theme you can note over here. But with regard to World Development Report 2015, which talks about mind, society and behavior, it specifically says is the poverty is a psychological state. And poverty as a psychological state, it is going to hinder the cognitive skills of an individual to compete and to develop. Now, in this context, what the article says is, in this process, there is an inherent bias against the poor people that they are not competitive. And the second thing is, so the rich people know more than the poor people is the second bias in this conception of the World Bank. Third thing, a behavioral economics which it is stressing towards framing a developmental strategy of the country. It is nothing but it is giving a new impetus or focus towards the neoliberal economics. So these are the things. And another major criticism is this article or this particular argument, it is failing to understand the structural problems which are responsible for the poverty. The structural problems such as income inequalities, unemployment, these were not taken into consideration into the framing of this behavioral economics. So it is mostly prejudiced, that is what is the article talks about. And next, LGBT rights. Now in this, understand that anywhere the discrimination exists, there are two things. One is implicit biases and institutional stereotypes. What are meant by implicit biases? It is not mentioned in this article. Actually, this was given in this week's frontline, this fortnight's frontline, that is white rage under the world affairs. So white rage in that article, why the racism or why the discrimination exists in every society. So they have given two major reasons. One is implicit bias. Now, in any country, if you ask, do you have casteism in your country? The people say, yes. But are you casteist? The people say no. So, but however, it means consciously we don't accept that we are casteist or we are biased or we are a racist. But subconsciously, based on our nurturing and our behavior, this implicit bias is growing in. And added to that, the government and its institutions, these people are also being the part of the society and social order. These stereotypes enter into the institutions and their functioning. That makes the discrimination much wider. Now, if you take killing of African Americans in United States, or the caste-based violence in India, or if you take about the so-called as LGBT discrimination against them, everything is based on implicit biases and institutional stereotypes that are built over a period of time. Now, in this case, the Supreme Court of United States of America, in the 14th Amendment Act, or in accordance with the 14th Amendment Act, said that the right to marry is implicit to LGBT rights. So what it said is, the marriage is the oldest institution, and many of the benefits the state wants to give to the citizens, all these are based on this marriage, institution of marriage. Now, not providing the access to this institution of marriage to the LGBTs, it is discriminating them against the affirmative action or benefits given by the state, or in way it is discriminating them to have the access to the benefits. Now, that is the reason why LGBT rights have to be recognized as equality rights under Amendment 14th under the Constitution. So, in this context, is this amendment or recognition of these rights is a legislative responsibility or a judicial responsibility? If it is a legislative responsibility, the conservative attitude of the legislature, which has to play to the popular mind, will never allow such a reform to happen. Now, the judiciary, which has to protect the rights of the people, has the judicial review powers. Whenever these rights come in question, the individual rights come in question, yes, it has every right to make a decision on these matters. So the action of the Supreme Court to give rights to the citizens, that is within the scope of the judicial review and within its ambit of existence, that is the protection of the fundamental rights. Now, in this case in India, still the section 377, it was recognized as illegal, and any unnatural sex is punishable in the country. So we have to observe this. And now the same act has been continued. In 1986, Bowers versus the Hardwick case, the Supreme Court itself has said the right to marry do not exist, and also it is declared the LGBTs that is not illegal, and any discrimination do not violate the statutes of this particular country. The same thing was taken a U-turn with the existing judgment. So, in this context, you can see the progress which is made in that particular society. Now, if you observe in India, the Kumar Kaushal versus the KK versus Naj Foundation, the Kumar Kaushal versus Naj Foundation, the Supreme Court has declared that it is the responsibility of the legislature to identify and to provide for these freedoms. Now again, the same argument comes up. Whenever the individual rights are violated, the Constitution has given the Supreme Court to provide for a legality to the rights of the citizens. So it was said as a retrogressive step by our Indian Constitution. And next is, what means it to be an American? Now, there are two arguments. One is conservative and other is a pragmatic liberal argument regarding racial discrimination in the United States. Now, an Indian American, Bobby Zindal, is in the presidential race from the Republican Party. Now, he told to the conservative line that we all shall be Americans, or we have to submerge our individual identities under the grand identity called as American. So the sub-identities, they are not important, but the grand identity of American is more important. So it means he is a kind of a defensive about his origins, where the conservative party generally sees the whites have the supremacy to rule the country, or this particular tendencies that exist among the conservatives. Now the author says, on the other hand, any president or any person has to acknowledge that there are cleavages in America, and it is better if they work towards building these particular social cleavages. So we have to acknowledge that there is a problem where the identities are in clash with each other. So in this context, how to bring them into the mainstream of the life, that has to be more positive argument than not acknowledging that there are differences across the so-called as identities, as America is a immigrant nation. So in this context, she says that there is a glass ceiling with regard to the people from the Asia and also people from the Africa to go into the higher the ladders in America. So to take up this, there are inherent policies and institutional prejudices that do not allow them to go to the highest levels in the organizations. So this was recent South Carolina, this was seen where the white supremacy has led to the killing of a few African Americans. And recently, Raghuram Rajan, that is facing up to global troubles, Raghuram Rajan, what he said is the depression like environment is still existing across the countries. Now, later he gave a clarification that the countries are going towards competitive monetary easing policies. So, because of this, the money is increasing, but however, it is failing to create the capacities. So, and next is it leads to overheating of the economies. So, what he suggested is a consolidation action shall exist across the countries, across the central banks of the countries. Now, this beggar the neighbor, let me get benefit against my neighbor. This particular attitude always kills everyone else. The brings in the greatest depressions across the world. So in India, if you see, still in spite of monetary easing, the demand did not pull up yet. So in this context, the state has to come forward and it has to initiate certain spending to pull up the demand in the economy. Unless then the economic growth what we are envisioning for, probably it may be in difficulty. And next, the PDS system. As I always said to you that the PDS is the source of the social security in India. So it is the greatest food safety net. One of the reasons why India did not have a major tragedy in the form of famine. The major reason being, one is Amartya Sen talks about active media and civil society, and the second thing is strong PDS system which was established throughout the length and breadth of the country. These are the reasons which kept us away from the so-called as these famines. Now let us see the PDS and its role, because the role of the PDS become very much controversial. The government wanted to shift towards the cash transfer scheme, doing away with the PDS over a period of time. But however, National Sample Survey recently which was conducted has given an opinion contrary to this, where the growth of dependence on the PDS is increasing in urban areas and rural areas. Almost it has got doubled in urban areas in the 5 years. On the other hand, in the rural areas, more than 75 to 90% of the people, they are dependent on the PDS for their livelihood. Even the wealthy people, they are dependent on the PDS for their daily needs. So, why such a access is increased to PDS in the country? The reason being decreased leakages. So one of the reasons why the cash transfers are argued are the leakages in the system, but it shows that the leakages have come down drastically. How we'll have to see how the cash transfers will handle this. Now again, here the policy planning research in the Ministry of Economic Affairs by Suhasini Haidar in this article, you can remember Amitabh Mattu's article. What it said is we need lateral entry into the so-called as Ministry of External Affairs. Shortage of the staff, a lack of independent ideas, a need to grow as a superpower, and growing need of diplomacy with regard to the sensitive issues surrounding India. All these makes creating a dynamic the policy planning research in the wing in the Ministry of External Affairs. But however, the IFS lobby, Indian Forest Service lobby, it has opposed to this. So it has to be a lateral entry, or IFS has to be given the greater prominence. Now, IFS is a bureaucratic institution. Now it is a generalist based institution. It is a specialist based institution. Thus lateral entry provides for the specialist knowledge. Now in this case, the conflict between the generalist and specialist is bound to grow over here. Even if you take the specialist, they shall be confined only towards the research with pragmatic inputs from the field. And second is, wherever the specialists come up, so the so-called as the silo mentalities, departmentalism, are working very closely to that particular specific area increases. The broader view we lost in this particular area. So then how to handle this issue is a major challenge. So but however, recent the government agreed to allow the international relations experts as consultants. Now the major challenge is these people are being taken for a temporary period of time. It means how many people will show interest into this posting as the career choice is a major question. Because when alternative career choices are more lucrative and they are been providing opportunities to move forward. They will be more attractive. Now here the promotional of chances are very limited because they are not into the line departments, they are into the specialized agency, and there are no fixed tenures which are been given, they are the contract posts. So how far the enthusiasts will line up for this is a major question. Thank you very much.